A very good evening to you. This is First News. I'm Temba Wobe. Bernard Membe, Tanzanian Foreign Minister, released the final report of the Southern African Development Community on the Zimbabwe elections in Harare today. Mr. Membe says that despite the shortcomings that were noted in the preliminary report, observers noted that the candidates were free to campaign, free to associate, free to express their views, and that voters were free to cast their votes. Mr. Membe said that consequently, SADC had concluded that the harmonized elections were free and expressed the will of the people.
A lot has been said, even as I'm talking here, a lot is being said about the credibility of the elections, to the negative. The SADC Election Observer Mission, however, while agreeing that some issues such as the delay of the voters' roll and the media polarization were facts that took place during the election process, there were so many other elements that, when put together, elevated the election of Zimbabwe to a credible status. The free election environment, the peaceful environment in which the election took place, the unhindered access and the non-intimidation of candidates and the voters, the free expression and the free campaigns, transparency and the free voting all constitute to the credibility under the prevailing conditions of Zimbabwe, and especially when compared to the same situation in 2008. And it is therefore our conclusion that the elections in Zimbabwe that were held on the 31st of July in 2013 were generally credible. I repeat, were generally credible.
Mr. Membe did not explain how the poll could be considered credible and an expression of the will of the people, given that the electronic voters' roll has, to date, never been made available to opposition parties as is required by law.
Also, the provision of voters' roll in time goes to the very heart of fairness in the election process. And this is now about fairness. If the voters' roll is not made available on time, the fairness of the election is brought into question. This is because voters' rolls are public documents, and it is the duty of the Electoral Commission to abide by Section 21, subsection 1 of 6 to 6 of the Electoral Act. We are saying so because our observers on the ground reported complaints related to the delay in issuing the voters' roll on time. And even in those areas where the voters' roll was issued a few days earlier, people had no access to it until on the date of the vote.
Douglas Monzora, spokesperson for the opposition MDCT, dismissed the SADC report.
Elections must be free, fair, and peaceful. But the message they are giving to us is that for Zimbabwean elections, they only need to be peaceful. We fundamentally disagree with that. We dismiss the report. However, they've made certain findings which are germane to a free and fair election. And these include access to the media, the voters' roll. They don't seem to understand why it is important that the voters' roll be there in an election like this. Well, this world is not made up of SADC only. We have other world bodies. We have the UN, we have the African Union, we have the European Union, we have countries more than are in SADC. But the sad thing is that SADC clearly wants to put Zimbabwe behind it. They are sick and tired of the Zimbabwean story. Unfortunately, the struggle for the Zimbabwean people continues. And as the MDC, we are now going to embark on a serious political program, a political struggle.
Monzora also said that this shows SADC is tired of Zimbabwe. MacDonald Lewanika, the coordinator for the Crisis in Zimbabwe Coalition, condemned the SADC statement as political.
Well, the statement by the SADC Observer Mission today, which is their final statement, was by and large a damn squib. There's nothing new that they told us that they hadn't already said before, or that their actions hadn't already pointed out to. the biggest disappointment for us with regards to the statement that SADC has released as the final statement is that there is no clear evidence of deeper thinking and analysis by SADC itself with regards to the elections that took place. It seems like an attempt to justify the position that they took just after the elections prior to putting together the reports from their observer mission. So, yeah, it has largely been disappointing, no surprises, and just an endorsement of actions and positions that they had taken just after the election.
And what did you make of the assessment of the media environment in Zimbabwe?
Well, I think that their assessment of the media environment in Zimbabwe was, by and large, okay. I think that there was an acknowledgement that there was a relegation of duty, especially by the state broadcasters. What I found a bit disquieting was their insinuation of external radio stations as pirate radio stations. It's clearly political language, and one would understand that where private media is concerned, we cannot be able to hold to the same standard as public broadcasters who are financed through citizens' tax dollars and mandatory licensing fees. Those have a greater responsibility to be fair in their approach and to be objective in their approach, whereas private actors, I think, set up their entities with agendas which they are allowed to pursue. So the fact that it is then inserted as a recommendation by SADC takes away or attempts to shroud the real issue, which is the unobjective, very partisan political nature within which our state broadcasters were covering the elections that took place on July 31.
So, what do you think is the implication of what SADC has now done, especially as you say to actually describe the external radio stations as pirates? What does this mean now?
Well, I'm not sure that if it means anything beyond political rhetoric. We know that the private radio stations that are operating externally in Zimbabwe are considered illegal here in Zimbabwe. They are not considered illegal in the countries from which they are broadcasting from. So there's really nothing to go on except that political statement to call them pirates and stuff.
Mr. Membe said that SADC would call on what he called pirate media stations operating outside Zimbabwe in the region to discontinue their broadcasts.
In trying to gauge the fairness of this election, the SADC Observer Mission focused its attention, among others, on the state media, pirate radio stations, and the voters' roll. The SADC Observer Mission, Election Observer Mission, noted that media, state and pirates, were highly polarized and for the most part biased along the political parties' lines. And in this regard, SEUM received accusations and counter-accusations on this issue from the contesting parties, and to some degree we saw merit on them. To that end, SEUM strongly recommends that ZEC implements to the letter and the spirit Chapter 12, Part 5 of Section 248 of the Constitution on Media Reform to be read together with the Electoral Act, Section 160E to 160H, which states inter alia, public broadcasters shall afford all political parties and independent candidates contesting on election such free access to their broadcasting services as may be prescribed. SEUM recommends that pirate media should end forthwith with their operations of operating from outside Zimbabwe.
Nhlanhla Dube, director of the Media Institute of Southern Africa in Zimbabwe, said SADC's focus is misplaced.
Well, I think first and foremost, it wasn't anything earth-shattering what came out of that press conference. It was to be expected. You would recognize the fact that in Malawi, almost all regional leaders endorsed the election, and it actually put the observers themselves in a very difficult position. I personally did not foresee a situation where they were going to issue anything conflicting or contradictory to what the leaders themselves were saying. But what I found quite shocking is the attack on exiled media, which attack is clearly, from what I read, is not grounded on substantive reasoning at all. Because one thing for sure is that a public media has different obligations than those of the private media. So for them to put the same kind of judgment and the same kind of yardstick for the public and the private media, I think they lost the plot.
And, this thing of calling the private media, especially the external broadcasters, pirates, what did you make of that they actually used that word, pirates, the word that is used to describe the external radio stations by ZANU-PF? Now that the Observer Mission is also using that, what do you make of that?
Well, it is quite surprising that regional observers can also be influenced by one political player who is based in Zimbabwe, even comes to the addiction, the choice of words. For all these months and years, we have insisted as Zimbabweans that there is not such a thing called pirates. What we have are exiled radio stations that have been forced to broadcast from outside of Zimbabwe because of the restrictive media laws in this country. I think if SADC is really serious about playing a part in resolving the Zimbabwean crisis, they should look at the reasons behind the exiling of these media outlets rather than completely criminalizing them as pirate radio stations. In this day and age, really, you cannot have a pirate medium because anyone can broadcast from anywhere as long or so long as they follow the laws of that particular place where they are operating from. I don't see why they should be criminalized with pirate radio stations. And to then call for their banishment is completely, I think, out of their mandate as observers. If they are going to call for the stopping of operations of these exiled radio stations on the basis of their partisan reporting, why not even also call for the stopping of operations in local media? Because they agree and admit that the local media are also partisan. Why would they want to call for the stopping of operations of exiled radio stations if that's the case?
But on the other hand, this issue of shutting down the external radio stations is actually in the GPA. So can they not then say we are just going with what the political parties in the coalition government had agreed to?
Well, my understanding is that we are post the GPA. Otherwise, if we are to revisit that document, then we can still continuously make demands under the GPA. Then we then assume that the MDC is still part and parcel of government. But the truth of the matter is, ZANU-PF is going to form the next government of this country. The GPA started our political transition. I don't understand why they cherry pick issues in the GPA, issues that ZANU-PF has been pushing all along, and then ignore other issues. Then that kind of selective observation raises problems and dents their credibility.
Because when you mention the issue of selective application, you can then also ask whatever happened to the issue of the voters' roll that the GPA partners from the opposition were calling for, and that voters' roll was never released for them. So, and we don't see that in the report by the SADC Observer Mission. They don't actually talk about that, which is really, really important, an important issue that was raised by the MDC formations.
Yeah, in the brief statement that I wrote that they issued, they also talk about problems relating to the timely provision of the voters roll to the contestants. But then they say, no, this does not in any way compromise the management and the administration of the election. They are actually creating a bad precedent in the region where contestants can decide the voters roll on time. But then you go on to endorse the management and the administration of that electoral process as having been transparent and credible. Clearly, they should have the same standards, the same principles used across the region. You cannot have rules of the game change, but at the same time ignore the changing and the tinkering, and then and rush for the easier route, and which in this case is to say credible.
The trial of human rights lawyer Beatrice Mtetwa continued in Harare Magistrates Court today. Ms. Mtetwa is charged with obstructing police in their duties on March 17th when they went to search the home and offices of senior MDC-T officials. It is Mthethwa's defense that she asked the police to produce a search warrant. Ms. Mthethwa was originally arrested and held for 8 days before being released on bail. It was widely condemned by local civil society organizations and international lawyers groups. If convicted, the internationally acclaimed lawyer could be sentenced to a maximum of 2 years imprisonment. South African gold miners affiliated to the National Union of Mine Workers, NUM, will go on strike on Tuesday. The union served a notice of strike to gold producers late last Friday.
Affected companies include South Africa's 4 main gold producers, Anglo Gold Ashanti, Gold Fields, Harmony Gold, Sibanye, and some smaller operations. The country's Chamber of Mines, which negotiates on behalf of gold producers, said on Tuesday it had made a final offer to unions to increase basic wages by between 6 and 6.5%.
Our shareholders, and here I must speak on behalf only of Harmony, Anglo Gold Ashanti and Sibanye, have indicated that they will not entertain above CPI increases.
Wage talks between NUM and the companies broke down last week. NUM represents about 64% of the over 120,000 workers in the gold mining. Calculations based on the spot price suggest that a complete shutdown of the gold sector of the indeterminate duration could cost South Africa more than 35 million a day in lost output. This will put pressure on a struggling economy already weighed down by ongoing strikes in auto manufacturing, construction, and aviation services. The country faces potential strikes from textile workers and petrol station employees.
Every month, the gold mining sector is on strike or doesn't produce, will lose 6 billion rand in foreign exchange to this country. That's foreign exchange that will not be replaced. 6 billion rand per month foreign exchange from the gold sector.
NUM has been seeking a 60% increase, while a more hardline rival wants pay hikes of up to 150%. The company says these demands are unrealistic given rising costs and falling in bullion prices.
The strike is continuing. 90,000 is down and will continue to be down until a solution is found. We are continuing to interact with each other. We've done that over the weekend. They moved to 7.5. It's not enough yet. And we are hopeful that if they continue to increase, then we may have to consult our members to get their feelings.
On Friday, Anglo American Platinum, the world's top platinum producer, said it could cut 4,800 jobs, laying off 3,300 workers and redeploying 1,600 workers. Jobs cuts are a sensitive issue in South Africa, where the unemployment rate is more than 25%, and mine labor violence, rooted in a union tough war, has killed dozens of people over the past 18 months, mostly on the Platinum Belt.
The Democratic Republic of Congo's army occupied the hills overlooking the eastern town of Goma on August 30th, after rebels said they withdrew to allow an independent investigation into shelling that has hit neighboring Rwanda.
The capture of Kibati is the biggest success in a year for Congo's army, and comes after the new UN brigade went on the offensive alongside government troops to drive back the M23 rebels who have fought an 18-month uprising in the eastern borderland. Rwanda accused Congo on Thursday, August 29, of shelling its territory and said such provocation will not be tolerated, raising fears that Congo's small but military powerful neighbor might openly intervene in a country where it has fought 2 wars in the last 2 decades. The M23 said it withdrew from Kibati to allow an investigation into the shelling that has killed civilians in Goma, a Congolese city of 1 million, and Kisenyi, a town along the lake on the Rwandese side of the border. Congolese soldiers in Kibati until Thursday, a rebel outpost on the front line overlooking Goma, chanted, "We won." The two burnt-out trucks were abandoned on the hilltop position. Colonel Olivier Amuli, a spokesperson for the Congolese Armed Forces, told journalists the Congo military cannot do much if the M23 soldiers had crossed the border into Rwanda. He said that if anyone takes arms against the government within Congo, they will face the full wrath of the army. He added the Congolese army's objective is to secure the country's borders and protect its citizens. Although heavy fighting has eased, there was sporadic firing on Friday afternoon. Congolese tanks fired on what they said were rebels positioned in the bush. Rwanda has been accused by UN experts of backing the rebels. Kigali denies the charge, but world powers have stepped up pressure on Rwanda to remain out of the Congo conflict. Amuli said the rebels had retreated towards Kibumba, some 10 kilometers north of Kibati. Government officials pointed out the body of a dead civilian on one of the abandoned hillsides who had apparently been executed with his hands tied behind his back, having been shot. The M23 rebels, named after March 23, 2009 peace deal that ended 4 years of the rebellion in eastern Congo, took up arms last year, saying the government had failed to honor the agreement, which included integration into the army. A Tanzanian peacekeeper was killed in Wednesday's fighting, the first death since a new UN intervention brigade first engaged rebels last week within an unprecedented mandate to stamp out armed groups and enforce peace in eastern Congo. South African military said on Friday it had received a request from the United Nations for 3 of its attack helicopters to be sent to Congo. Rwanda has in the past justified intervening in Congo by saying it must hunt down Hutu extremists who took part in the 1994 genocide. But a complex web of local politics and regional conflict over ethnicity, land and minerals are also at play.
And that ends this bulletin of First News. On behalf of the news team, I wish you pleasant viewing on First TV, your nation, your station.